So the question I would have, I guess the question I would ask for you, so I think that as I observe my life, I can say a lot of things about who I am and what I believe, but then I can also observe how I live. And they're both true, but I think the way that you live is probably more true than what you say you believe. That's a whole nother discussion that doesn't have to do with philosophy, but just could do with life in general. But one of the things you've kind of helped me with is to maybe realize that I am more of a materialist than I realized. I think I'm a pragmatist. I think that I'm a materialist for the most part, if I'm just being honest about how I live, how I think, how I operate, what pieces of religion that I love and what pieces of religion that I don't like.
Yeah.
I'm probably, and they, even the ones that trigger me, right? Like, so like recognizing that I'm triggered by something, I go, well, why is that? Well, it's because I'm a materialist. Yeah. So not necessarily a choice, but a position in which I find myself. So
pretty natural.
It's pretty natural to say, like, yeah, I mean, the one that seems hard is to say this is all fake and spiritual, it's all spiritual. That seems, at least for my brain, is like, that's harder to follow. So a long way of saying, but I also acknowledge I'm pretty blended. And I think my next question next time will be more about that blending, which is interesting. But long ramble. The question I have for you is, if I'm going to say that, if I'm going to go, all right, you know what? That's what I am. I'm going to embrace it. I'm going to own it. What would be your cautions for me? Like, what are the things for me as a materialist that I need to think about or be aware of? So not convincing me that I'm wrong necessarily, but saying like, hey, fine position, lots of people take it, but you should be aware of these 3 or 4 things.
Yeah, I love that, Jed. And you. To answer the question directly, if Jack Burgess were to say pure materialism, well, that's part of why I'm writing the book, right? Like, okay, so if that's the case, what are the consequences?
Right?
So if you're going to do that, only the material realm, then the consequences of that is that everything is pure cause and effect. There's no Jack Burgess soul. There's no spiritual realm. There's no God. There's no heaven. There's no hell. Oh, some people are like, yay, finally we got rid of that hell thing. Okay. But then if you really say that and then you're going to own it, that's part of what I want. Then, like, okay, if you want to be a materialist, then let's actually really be one, right?
Yeah.
Let's be one, and then flesh that out. And that's where you get someone like a Nietzsche who's like, we're going to do it. God's dead. The concept of God is dead. Philosophically, God is dead. Let's just move it all over here. And go pure humanism, right? Really lean into it. So he spent his life really fleshing that out. And we land on the absurdity of morality.
Yeah.
The ridiculousness of life. There's no meaning, right? There's no Jack Burgess anymore. You're a sack of chemicals reacting to things. There's no free will. Like, I would just start cautioning you on, like, why would you want to be a materialist? Well, maybe you're saying, well, I don't want to be one. This is just it really is true. And I'm like, well, remember, you're trusting, you're choosing, so you get to choose this, right? Ironically, if you choose materialism, you've just gotten rid of choice now too, because everything's just cause and effect, chemical reactions, electrical impulses. And so we start really talking about that. And so I would caution you saying, you know what, you love you love freedom. I think you like being Jack Burgess, right? I think you like relationships and connections. And you get to continue to like those, but if you're going to go with pure materialism, there's nothing behind it. There's no substance to it except for the substance of matter and electricity.
Right.
So love isn't real, it's pure chemistry and it's electrons bouncing off of each other. The relationships, like, it's not real. And you're like, well, but it is real, I'm like, okay, it's real because it's unfolding in time. but that's all that it's doing. We're just kind of floating along. And many people like, I'm okay with that. But the other thing that we lose, that I would caution you, one of the biggest things that I would caution you on, that we lose, is a God who is loving and in control, and who can step into the material realm and is in the material realm and is available for relationship and longevity. And like Jesus was even saying to Nicodemus here, right? Spiritual life, eternal life. And then you have a God who can redeem pain, redeem suffering, bring real hope, who can give us more than our 80 years here, and who can connect us and unite us, who can give us objective purpose and meaning, who we can serve. Relationships, all this stuff ends up having a richer context, because I'm talking to Jack Burgess, who isn't just an electronic connection, stimulus back and forth. You're an actual being. I'm a being. We're choosing to connect. We're choosing to love. We're choosing to, grow together, learn together. We're on the journey, versus it all just randomly unfolding. So I don't know if that answered the question. I tried to be as direct as I could, but I'd be concerned with you losing identity, losing free will, losing self, losing love, losing a God who can redeem and intervene amidst all this pain and suffering and bring healing and hope, losing relationship, losing community, losing all those things, because they all become electronic construct, not actual real entity.
Yeah. I think you always talk about like isn't that sort of the gist behind Frankenstein?
Yeah. There's a great connection with Frankenstein, is if all we are, the horror, right? The horror of all we are is just animated tissue, electrically animated tissue. If that's it, well, okay, let's accept it and move on. And well, this kind of, it unfolds. But then the consequences of that are massive, right? Morality's out the window, relationships out the window. I mean, Lewis and Chesterton in particular realized that it almost just does, it's like self-defeating, it almost doesn't work, because the way that we figured that out was using logic and reason, but logic and reason don't even exist anymore, because there's nothing to, there's no other to be able to think about. There's nothing doing the thinking. It's just all unfolding. It's all electrons, right?
Yeah.
We're basically computers, right? And so, yeah, the Frankenstein myth will never go away, because it is the ultimate horror. Mary Shelley nailed it. She's like, wait, that's it? That's all we are? There's no creator. We're our own creators. It's a huge deal.
Yeah.
So that's where I would push back when you would say you lean towards materialism. That's part of why I wrote the book, because I think I was what people would call an unbelieving believer. Yeah, I'm a believer in the Bible and a believer in the story, a believer in Jesus. But like Nicodemus, when we have God in the flesh and the Holy Spirit and all this spiritual reality, yeah, I believe that. And really, I was living like a materialist, believing in all this spiritual stuff, believing in it, but not really living from it and living it out and really embracing it and believing it like Jesus was calling us into. So you're not alone there, right? But I would push back on when you say you're a materialist and operating like one, when I know you and I know you're asking these questions right now. Most people, when I push them on that, realize, well, I'm not really only that.
Yeah, and that gets to the blended. I there's no way. I mean, so part of what I would credit you for in my life is in some ways forcing me to ask these questions.
Yeah.
When I ask the questions, I bump up with what I have been told to believe or thought that I believed, and then I bump up against what I actually practice with my life, right? Which is what you just said, right? Like I can say I believe in walking on water, but I don't ever try and do it.
There we go.
So I can say I believe that that was a real thing that happened, but I've never seen it happen. So like, so when you actually lean into it, you start to go like, well, my actions don't match. I want to live a life that's consistent. One of the things I love about your framework is that in some way for me, it's enabled me to ask, is my life consistent with what I say I believe? And then on the flip side of that is like, is what I say I believe actually workable? Like, that's fine to say you believe that, but if you're not doing it, you must not work. It's your thing about when we talk about trust, like we use what we trust, right? So I was like, well, maybe it's not trustworthy. And then you start to look at your life. Anyways, it's been a very good journey for me to take. And so what I would say is very much blended. The way that it's blended for me now is I have to go, well, what I was grown up taught about spirituality is not what I adopted. So why not? So let's lean into that a little bit and go, what is spirituality? What does that mean for me if it doesn't mean what it's always mean? If I'm going to say, yeah, sure, let's try it. Let's try some of the things that Jesus said were possible for us. So yeah, just lots of thoughts. I definitely blended. So like for me, if it's possible to be a Christian who is also a materialist.
Well, welcome to the club, right? Like,
can I take another impossible stance? I'm a materialist who believes in Christianity. Yeah, it's a mess, Matt. You totally screwed my life up, man. Thanks. I appreciate it. I really endorse the book. Everyone should read it.
I'm here for you, Jack.
No, it's all good. Like, I mean, I think, you mentioned Buddhism. Like, I think, again, as I look at my life, you said you were an unbelieving believer.
Yeah.
I was a Christian Buddhist. I was a Christian Buddhist my whole life. I adopted the pieces of Christianity were actually more in line with Buddhism. And when I actually looked at it, I'm like, all right, I got to ask that question. Why is that? Am I a Buddhist? Because it's more in line with what I think and believe. It's more in line with how I act. And so now I have to decide what changes in my life do I need to make and why would I make them? Yeah. And I would make them because I believe something is more true. I would make it because I believe it's more trustworthy. I would make that choice because I believe ultimately that it's a better way to live. You use that phrase, right? It's a better way to live. So that tees up, I think that's a good end. I think, so just to tee up the next one, I kind of want to talk a little bit about so I want to jump back into the book. I want to talk a little bit more about what we mean when we say real or reality. And then I want to talk a little bit about I want to frame it correctly. So yeah, I think we'll just jump back into the book. I kind of want to hear from you. So I've been a little honest about where I'm landing for the most part. And I know you've been pretty clear and honest. So not that you haven't been honest, but like to dive in a little bit more about like, why have you made these choices? These choices to believe what you believe. Is it because you believe it's more trustworthy? Because you believe it's more real? Is it because you believe it's more all-encompassing? Is it because it just aligns better with your experiences of your life? So we'll jump back into the book and let's jump back into like the nature of reality and like how it is that we make choices based on what we believe. I love it. That's a good topic. So
great. This is so fun, Jack. And I appreciate your authenticity. Thanks for all of that. Because I think that's part of this is we're here because I'm on this journey. You're on it as well. And we are all trying to figure this out. Like I'm this framework, right? One of the things that you mentioned, I think this, I'll let it go here, is, but it allows us to hopefully safely ask these questions and then confront what we are believing, right? And then is there a way, what I wanted to end with is, I don't think it has to be all subtraction. Have the materialist stuff. There's all this good in that, right?
Yeah.
Well, how do we take the materialism that you have and add more spiritual, right? How do
Yeah.
I take the Buddhism that we have and add more material? How do I take the distinctions of theism and add more unity, which a lot of us could use right now, right?
Yeah.
How do I take really, really good unity and say, whoa, 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 there's some healthy distinction here? Like, that's the direction that this goes. I think people who are willing to hang in there with it realize, oh, it's not, doesn't have to be all this either or, right?
Right.
I can find a healthy path forward. Jesus models this, where I don't have to let go of everything that I'm carrying, especially the honest stuff that's just really real, right?
Yeah.
But where can I add? Where can I add to what I'm believing? What true things am I miss? That's one thing you asked originally. I want to say, like, if you ask me what am I going to miss out on materialism? Oh my goodness, the people who are only going materialism, they're missing out on all this other amazing truth that's the spiritual truth, right?
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
don't want to miss out. You don't want to miss out. We want to make the most out of it. Fair enough.
Yeah. Totally. No,
Yeah.
I love that. And that's what I think that's what I mean by, yeah, I love the framework of additive.
Yeah.
And that's to get to the trust list, right? Like that's, to me, that's the underlying message of the trust list is like, dude, your stool has one leg.
Yeah.
How's that? That's not going to work out. Eventually
How's
that's
that
going to
going?
topple. So like, you know, you could go beyond have a stool. You could actually have a table full of people
Yeah.
and they all got four legs,
Yeah.
like it's, it's, so
Exactly.
anyways, I think additive is a great way to end. Like, what can we add? So one, can you become aware? Maybe we're writing a new book. So
Yeah.
first is awareness.
Yeah.
Chapter 2 is addition.
Yeah.
Have to come up with a chapter 3 that starts with A. Maybe we'll discover that along the way. But
We'll figure it out.
anyways, this is awesome, Matt. I love it. Thanks.
Thank you, Jack.
No, man.